Okay, so we were starting to look at the Gilded Age. We're going to look at the election of 1876 at this point. All right. The Republican Party is going to nominate Rutherford B. Hayes, who we did talk about earlier. He's the president that sent the troops in during the Great Railroad Strike of 1877. The Democrats nominated Samuel Tilden. Tilden won the popular vote by 250,000 individual votes. However, when it came to the Electoral College, there were four states that were in dispute. Right? And so it goes to the House of Representatives, where they call it the corrupt bargain, one of the corrupt bargains of our history, but the Compromise of 1877. And basically, the Democrats agreed to allow Hayes to become president. In exchange, the Republicans agreed to end Reconstruction. Reconstruction is still going on from the end of the Civil War. Several states still haven't been readmitted to the Union and have Union troops uh, still guarding them, basically. It's been 12 years since the end of the Civil War, so Reconstruction is going to come to an end. And so Hayes ends up winning the Electoral College once these states are decided, 185 to 184. And there's a map of the Electoral College of 1876. All right. One of the things going on, it started with an earlier president, President Andrew Jackson, back in the 1830s, was known as the spoils system. And basically, winning candidates would appoint friends and supporters to government jobs, whether they were qualified or not. The worst part is that some of the appointees were corrupt, accepting bribes like we talked about in the last video with the railroads actually budgeting money to bribe these government officials. Right? Well, by the 1870s, it got bad enough that some people wanted to reform the spoils system. President Hayes being one of those. He didn't want to take any official actions, didn't change any laws or anything like that or try, but what he did was try to set a precedent and only appointed individuals who were qualified for the jobs. Secondly, he fired people who were unnecessary. A lot of people, a lot of presidents had created jobs for people just to pay back for their support when getting elected. And so a lot of these people, those jobs were eliminated under President Hayes. Hayes does a decent job as president. However, the election of 1880 comes around after such a close election. The Republicans decide to dump him, partly also because they had split into three factions, just another fancy word for groups. One of those groups was the stalwarts, and that part of the Republican Party was in full support of the spoils system. They thought if you won, you should be able to do what you want with those government jobs. The second group were the half-breeds. These were Republicans who wanted to reform the system, but remain loyal to the party. And the last group were independents, and these are Republicans who are just completely opposed to the spoils system. Well, when it comes down to it, the Republicans end up nominating James Garfield for president, and he was a member of the half-breeds group. So he wanted to reform the system, but was still a staunch Republican. And that's Mr. Garfield. The Democrats nominated a former Army general, Civil War veteran, General Winfield S. Hancock. And there's General Hancock. Garfield won the popular vote by about 10,000, and he ends up getting the Electoral College 214 to 155. And there's the actual Electoral College vote. Notice the South voting all Democrat. For about 100 years, that becomes known as the Solid South, as the South will vote only Democrat, basically still being mad about the Civil War. As president, Garfield takes office in 1881. He's only in office for about 3-4 months when he gets shot by Charles Guiteau. That is Charles Guiteau. Guiteau had been a supporter of Garfield's. Mr. Garfield dies 3 months later, but Guiteau was mad because he didn't get a job. Under the spoils system, he was a supporter of Garfield. He thought he should have had a job, so he ends up shooting President Garfield. That leads this man into the presidency, and that is President Arthur. Chester Arthur was the vice president for Garfield. He assumes the presidency in 1881, and he was a member of the stalwarts, which is what Guiteau was hoping for. He thought, now Garfield's dead, Arthur will be president. I don't know how to figure he's getting a job out of prison, but hey, no accounting for crazy sometimes. Arthur, however, ends up working to reform the spoils system. He takes a look at it, when it gets so bad that people are getting shot for not getting a job, that something's wrong with the system. And in 1883, he signs off on the Pendleton Civil Service Act, a law passed by Congress, and it establishes a civil service test. And if you wanted to work for the government, you would have to take that test, and it was basically meant to make sure you were qualified.